One of the first things we did in this unit was we talked about the sum of the interior angles of a polygon. So in any shape, specifically a triangle, what do we know that the angles on the inside add up to? 180. What about a rectangle? What about a pentagon?
480.
720.
720.
Okay, if you're not sure,
600.
our formula is n minus 2 times 180. Put the wrong parenthesis. N minus 2 times 180, where n is equal to the number of sides.
How much percent is the final one?
Okay. Then the second formula we did was the measure of one interior angle of a regular polygon. So your key words here are, if you're only looking for one and it's regular, you would do your n minus 2 times 180 divided by n. And that would give you the measure of just one inside angle. The sum of the exterior angles of a polygon, this one wasn't a formula, it was just a fact that you had to remember, and that was 360 degrees. And then your key words again, the measure of one exterior angle of a regular polygon, you did 360 divided by n. So these were your 4 formulas that we learned that you had to know when to use to be able to solve for different parts. After we had gone over those 4 formulas, we then went into our shapes. One of our shapes was a trapezoid. We also had a special kind of trapezoid called the isosceles trapezoid. So what was special about a trapezoid? It had one pair of parallel sides. That was all that makes a trapezoid, a quadrilateral with one pair of parallel sides. Now if it's isosceles, the 2 legs would be congruent. We also had base angles, and we had 2 pairs of base angles congruent. And then lastly, we had something about our diagonals, and that was that the diagonals were congruent. Okay, so these were all the properties that we had to know about a trapezoid. From there, we went on to parallelograms. We can leave it up here for another minute. Sorry. Yeah.
Could you go back up? Oh, I never really looked at it. That's funny.
Just comparing.
6 times 2 was 12, 4, 64.
Okay, so next up was the parallelogram. What do you remember about a parallelogram? Okay, the parallelogram has 2 pairs of parallel sides. So we can say these opposite sides here are parallel. Okay, what's another property of parallelograms that you remember? Opposite sides are congruent. So opposite sides are congruent. Opposite angles I heard. Opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive angles are supplementary. And the diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so the diagonals cut each other in half. Okay, we then learned about 3 special parallelograms. And so one of the things we had to remember is that all the remaining 3 shapes that we went over have these same 5 properties. But they have some additional ones because they're special types of parallelograms. So the first type was a rectangle. What was special about a rectangle besides the fact that it has all of this up here? It has 4 right angles. So all the angles here are 90 degrees. Let's see, we also had that the diagonals are congruent. So not only do they bisect each other, but in a rectangle, they're congruent, and that made us have isosceles triangles on in the middle. From there we went to a rhombus. So a rhombus has all 5 of those parallelogram properties plus 3 more. So what was special about a rhombus? Diagonals bisect something. Diagonals bisect angles. What else?
There's 4 congruent sides.
4 congruent sides. So all sides are congruent. The opposite angles congruent part comes from the fact that it's a parallelogram. There was something else about the diagonals.
Oh, the diagonals form right angles.
The diagonals are perpendicular to one another, forming right angles. Okay, and then our last thing was a square. Now a square has all the properties of a parallelogram, all the properties of a rectangle, and all the properties of a rhombus. Because a square is a combination of a rhombus and a rectangle put together. So it's a rhombus and a rectangle. Okay, that was Unit 5. Most of Unit 5 was knowing your properties so that you knew how to set up equations to know what was equal. Okay, any questions that you guys have about Unit 5? Because that was pretty much Unit 5 in a nutshell. Again, you have that foldable that we made that you can use to study or to help you. But it was mostly just these formulas and properties.